people who aren't willing to risk their lives for something, they don't come to Drakkenheim. This is not an adventure for the timid characters. This is an adventure for people who want to get something.
Welcome to the Character Sheet, comicbook.com's official home for tabletop and fantasy news. I am Christian Hoffer, and today I'm joined by some very special guests to talk about some pretty freaking cool news. I'm joined, if you are a Dungeons and Dragons connoisseur, you surely recognize these folks. Monty and Kelly from the Dungeon Dudes. Hello, how are you both doing?
Hello, thanks for having us
Great.
on.
Excited to be here.
Thank you for coming on, and we're actually here to talk about not the Dungeon Dudes, which we could do an entire episode about that. We're here to talk about the fact that Dungeons of Drakkenheim is actually going to be added to D&D Beyond here. Pre-orders, I believe, are available probably around the time that this video is going live. So, one, how cool is that?
Super cool.
It's still kind of sinking in for both of us.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a fast track. We heard the news not actually that long ago that this was going to be happening. And honestly, this is something that we've been dreaming of since, the first dream was actually writing the book. And then after that, the question that everybody was asking is, can I access this information on D&D Beyond? And we were like, yeah, in our dreams. And now here we are.
So let's go all the way back to the beginnings of Dungeons of Drakkenheim, because one, it was a huge success story. It raised, I don't know how many millions of dollars, but millions of dollars on Kickstarter. So when did you first conceive of the book, and how long did it take you to even get to the point that you were going to kickstart it?
Yeah, the original Dungeons of Drakkenheim campaign began in 2018 as our actual play. We started it because our YouTube audience, which was growing at the time, I think we had maybe in the ballpark of 50,000 subscribers. So we were still, we were feeling great at that time, but that was still very early in our YouTube career. And our audience was asking, can we watch you play? And so we thought, okay, well, I have this idea for a throwaway campaign. We'll do 12 episodes of live streaming and see how it feels to live stream a campaign. And chances are we'll get bored of it and we'll be done after 12 episodes. My partner loves to say, you said that this was only going to be 12 episodes. And of course,
we're 5 years later.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And as we were wrapping up the first season of the show, the first 50 episodes, people started to ask us if they could get my GM notes because they wanted to run the campaign for themselves. They were really inspired. And so from there, Kelly and I started really discussing how we might bring this to life and really vastly expand the world, vastly expand the adventure. And so it came to that we had been doing some freelance work with Ghostfire Gaming, our publisher. We pitched them on it, and we brought it to Kickstarter. We spent a ton of time massively expanding. The book is a massive expansion on the original campaign because Kelly, of course, ended up adding so much more. Like it's an order of magnitude more than what the original campaign was, even though it's still based on that original game that we all played together. And yeah, it just at every turn, we've just kind of been blown away by the community response, by the people playing it, and how this has all come about.
Now, when you launched it on Kickstarter, were you prepared that it was going to make 7 figures?
No. I actually very specifically remember Ghostfire Gaming calling me out. It was our first Kickstarter ever. And before it went live, we were meeting that morning. And they said, okay, guys, let's place bets on how much you think this is going to make. And I remember saying, okay, we're running this for a month. And I'm like, I'm going to put my bet in at $100,000. And they all burst out laughing at me. And they were like, come on, Kelly, we can do better than that. And I was like, no, guys, it's our first Kickstarter. I'm aiming for $100,000. That would be amazing. And we hit 100,000, I think, in the first 3 minutes. So I was wrong. And I was happy to be wrong in that instance.
There's a moment we've talked with people, various folks who run YouTube channels and things like that, and everyone has a moment when they realize, oh God, this what I do is real. Was that your moment when you saw just how big that Kickstarter got?
It's definitely one of the moments, I think. You know, I knew we were writing the book, and there was a lot of nerves about, like, is this actually going to be something that people like? And there's been a lot of moments since then that have proven that people like it. And honestly, it still hits me every time. Monty and I often will just sit at, like, even today, I feel like we were sitting there and, like, we'll have these really nice friendship moments where we're just like, man, our book is doing this and this, and we're just like, wow, like, how did this come to be? And we're very proud of that fact. And I'm starting to have confidence in maybe, you know, maybe I can write D&D stuff. It's possible.
I think for me, the thing that I remember during the original campaign saying that I wasn't ready to relax until the book was in people's hands and they were running campaigns. And so now that I've been able to hear from people who have run Dungeons of Drakkenheim for their own players and hear the stories of how memorable their campaigns have been, how much fun people have had exploring our world, those are the stories that make me feel like more so than any of the other success, that is the biggest success, because that means that the story, the adventure, the world is reaching people. They're creating memories, they're having experiences, exploring this dark and horrific fantasy world. But I think that that's the biggest gift, I think, for me. For me personally, as a creator, both Kelly and I have backgrounds in various types of creative writing, theater, screenwriting, and I think for me, what's so magical about the medium of role-playing games and writing adventures is it very much is, as a creator, you get to hand something to someone else and say, would you like to play with this? What are you going to do with it? And rather than people just responding directly to, you know, the static media that you've created. And for me, I think that type of engagement that people get to have with what we've created is so rewarding for me to hear those stories.
With this now moving on to a new platform, D&D Beyond, which is, you know, just to be realistic, it is the biggest platform for Dungeons and Dragons that is out there. You know, it has totally changed the game of Dungeons and Dragons, for, you know, not the rules, obviously, but it is one of the reasons for its, you know, ongoing massive success. But I guess, you know, just the question I'm trying to ask is, how do you feel that you're getting exposed to an even larger audience? You know, you already have a massive YouTube audience. Obviously, you know, people know who you are. You know, you raised a ton of money on Kickstarter, you know, funding the creation of this book, and now it's about to hit an even larger platform. How does that feel? And, you know, what do you think that D&D Beyond is going to do, you know, to Dungeons at Drakkenheim and for Dungeons and Drakkenheim?
Well, I think that, even to just go off of what Monty answered to the last question, was like, one of the most rewarding things is hearing the stories of people actually playing this campaign. And so by putting it on D&D Beyond, the ease of use that D&D Beyond offers, like, I love D&D Beyond. I find it so much. I was a person who swore by pen and paper, and, you know, I bought all of the magic card sets, the spell cards, sorry, and all of those. I had I used to come to D&D with a binder that had all of my spells in like a card slots and everything ready to go. And there is something beautiful about that, but boy, is it easy to just hover over a spell and read the whole thing. And so that ease of use, and as somebody who buys both the physical books and then buys the books again on D&D Beyond, I know how powerful of a marketplace that is and how good of a tool it is. And so I think this is just going to open up the avenue for us to be able to experience in an even broader way those amazing stories of people experiencing the world that we created and the game and everything that we've done. And I'm really excited. You know, it's going to be good for us because more people get to see our world, but the enjoyment that we get out of hearing people experiencing our world is something that other people's joy from this adds to our joy. So I'm just excited to see all the people who are like, wow, this is such a good campaign, and tell the stories of the horrible, horrible things that happen to their player characters in the world of Drakkenheim.
And I think as well, I am very proud of the adventure. I think that it, especially with being a adventure on D&D Beyond, I think it's going to be something that people who love dark fantasy, really dark fantasy, they love eldritch terror and cosmic horror, and especially if you like faction intrigue and political horror and all those layered on top of one another. I think that what's really unique about Dungeons of Drakkenheim as an adventure, from talking with the dungeon masters that have run it, is no two Drakkenheim campaigns are ever the same because of the open-ended nature of the game. You can play in it. Many people talk about, they played Rise of Tiamat and they defeated Tiamat and they have amazing, memorable stories. And of course, every group, every D&D campaign, even ones that are playing the same adventure, they have different stories that they tell. But most of the stories end with, and then we killed the big bad evil guy and saved the world. Drakkenheim asked the question, well, what is the world going to be like after your choices? What are the consequences of your actions? Because Dungeons of Drakkenheim doesn't have a big bad evil guy flat out. There's 5 different factions, and it's up to the players to decide who are their enemies and who are their allies. And so this is a campaign that is going to have so many different unique stories and endings. And I think that I'm really excited to hear from more people experiencing the campaign and playing a campaign that has this freedom and flexibility. And I think, so many of the reviews of people that have run the adventure already, played it, talked about it, have talked about, I think have talked about how good the book is at helping dungeon masters run this open-ended faction intrigue, exploration, eldritch horror campaign. And I think that having a bigger audience, I'm kind of like, yeah, this is the true test. It's like now we're really going to see if the work that we put into making sure that this adventure is fun, exciting, that despite being a complex adventure, and it is a complex adventure, but it's one that we really put a lot of work in writing it to make sure that a dungeon master is empowered to run the adventure and to run it in a very responsive way. And so I'm excited to see how well people take that.
Really quick, for people who haven't gotten to, who aren't familiar with Dungeon Dudes and, haven't seen the actual play of this, can we dive a little bit into the factions and who they are and what they are? Go ahead.
So Drakkenheim is set in a dark fantasy world where the capital city of a great nation was destroyed in an eldritch storm of meteors 15 years prior. Civil war raged through the nation. The royal family destroyed itself in a civil war. And now Drakkenheim is a contaminated wasteland filled with horrible monsters and magical crystals of vast power. And these 5 factions have come to the city because they have different ideas over what should happen to the city of Drakkenheim, who should rule it, and what should be done with the delirium crystals that were left behind.
Within that, so the 5 factions who all have very differing opinions, we have the Hooded Lanterns, which are remnants of the city guard and soldiers of the Civil War. So there were many expeditions into Drakkenheim. A lot of them failed, or pretty much, all of them to this point failed. But those who did survive formed the Hooded Lanterns. So they are what's left of the militia of Westamar, the nation of Westamar, and the city of Drakkenheim. Their main goal is to find a rightful heir to the throne of Drakkenheim and reclaim the city and kind of they believe that they can get it back to something redeemable in terms of what it, maybe never quite what it used to be, but their goal is to try to clean it up as best they can. Beyond that, we have the Silver Order Knights, which is a knightly order of paladins from Illyria, which is a neighboring nation. They are sort of a divine order. They're knights of a religion, and they believe that the delirium crystals are a contaminant, they are evil, and they need to be destroyed at all costs. So they are marching towards the city of Drakkenheim in hopes of destroying delirium. But before they do that, they have several relics of their faith that were in the city of Drakkenheim that they need to recover first. So they don't want to go blowing up the whole city until after they've recovered their very specific relics. But after that, they're okay burning it to the ground.
Alongside these are the Amethyst Academy, which is the largest and only organization of magical researchers and scholars and educators in the setting. And though they're few in number, they want to research the delirium, discover its origins, and most importantly, how to make powerful magic items and new spells using it. They do not want to destroy the delirium at all. They would very much like to harvest it and collect it. And if you can see in the graphic behind me, there's this big shattered tower. That used to be their stronghold. And it was destroyed and has a vast library of magical lore and powerful artifacts in it. And the Amethyst Academy would very much like to get that back. The Academy is very elusive. The way that I like to describe them in short is they're kind of like if the kind of the Illuminati ran a school for a magical school. And so they don't like risking their own lives. So that's why they need adventurers. Another faction that really doesn't want to destroy the delirium either is the Followers of the Falling Fire. They believe that the delirium is a herald of a new divine age to come, and that it is the secret to future salvation. Incidentally, the Followers of the Falling Fire and the Knights of the Silver Order originate in the same religion that is now undergoing a religious split between them over the disagreement of delirium. So these two factions strongly oppose one another because they have the same core faith, but different interpretations of what the delirium represents for their faith. And finally, though, if you're not necessarily interested in all the politics necessarily, and you just want to make bank, you might want to sign up with the Queen's Men, which is a loose conglomerate of all the bandits and thieves and scavengers that have taken to the city, all pulled together by an enigmatic figure called the Queen of Thieves, who has a mysterious origin and even more mysterious goals.
The Queen of Thieves is probably one of our favorite NPCs. She's just so fun. Very manipulative group of people. And one of my favorite things is when we were writing out each of these 5 factions, we kind of got to detail what they would be like if they were allies to the party. So we have different boons and different
quests.
Boons and quests that they can give the party, but then also they have strike teams and schemes if they are made enemies of. And my other favorite bit is that each faction comes with a list of what their goals in the city are. And actually, I think that the Queensmen is one of the most ridiculous quest givers because you're just going full super bandit mode. So depending on the type of players you have, this is how different a campaign of Drakkenheim can be. In our actual play, we sided with the Amethyst Academy and the Hooded Lanterns, and then kind of flipped over to the Silver Order and the Hooded Lanterns. And now we're kind of in a mixed
There's
spot
been several betrayals. Yeah.
There's a lot of betrayals. But meanwhile, we go online and we hear about somebody who's like, yeah, our whole party joined the Followers of the Falling Fire and they're going straight off in that. Another group is fully behind the Queen's Men. So it really depends. Each of the factions presents itself in a way that you could say, oh, they have a really good point. But you could also say, wait, are they evil? And because each faction has that, it's really up to the players to decide who is the lesser of all the evils and who is the most right.
This is not a Unite the Factions campaign. Ultimately, it's possible to make alliances between the factions and lots of backstabbing opportunities, but it is ultimately one where the players need to make that choice and then experience the consequences for what those choices are. But because there's so many different combinations, the campaign kind of we give the dungeon master a bunch of tools for how to role play the factions, how to role play their goals, and rather than saying this is what actually will happen, we give the philosophy of all the factions, how they respond to different things, and that allows that player-driven choice because the players themselves are given a personal quest. that they want to achieve. And so they might have different feelings about the factions based on their own individual goals that then inevitably get them mixed up in the intrigue of the factions. And all of that is set against the ruined, contaminated wasteland that is Drakkenheim, filled with all of the eldritch monsters.
And we also have some iconic monsters in there as well, and the contamination does play a major role in the campaign.
I was about to ask, we have to talk about the monsters really quick. What sort of monsters can we expect in this?
So one of the first questions that Monty and I asked is if we have this eldritch contamination that literally mutates everything it touches. And when I say everything, I don't just mean organic tissue. You'll find buildings that have been turned entirely into glass or flesh. You'll find constructs that are warped and changed by this contamination. So it affects everything. And one of the questions is, if you have this contamination that literally mutates people into horrible monsters, what sorts of things were in the city when this meteor struck? And we made a list, and that list contained rats, fish, dogs, birds, and people. And also a few of the iconic, we have something called the Executioner, which was a construct who used to be the city executioner, who still roams the streets of Drakkenheim, contaminated. But among the rats, you have you have iconic figures in each of these groups as well. You have the Rat Prince, who you might want to look out for at earlier levels. We also have the Crimson Countess, the leader of the Harpies, the Lord of the Feast, who is the leader of the Garmir, which is the sort of dogs the way they've transformed, and we have the Duchess, who is the leader of the Fish Folk. Did I miss any of them?
Well, and then beyond that, we just have everything from full body horror, Akira mode monsters that are just mounds of flesh spilling over everywhere, lots of tentacles, too many eyes in too many places, and all that good stuff. Because the delirium and the eldritch contamination kind of gave us that creative license to basically make up any sort of crazy nightmare monster that we wanted to. And so, in fact, what might happen is the players themselves might turn into monsters, because the eldritch contamination system means the players themselves can gain contamination. They have a chance to gain mutations. There's a whole table of all these different mutations that you can develop. And contamination, if you get too contaminated, your character transforms into a monster. And that is the end of your character's story as far as the campaign goes. But and that is because it is possible to reverse a monster's transformation, but that would represent kind of the end goal of the campaign, to fix even one person's transformation in that way, and one that will require great sacrifice and ingenuity. The contamination that infuses the city is such that is so bad that characters actually can't take a long rest in the ruins of Drakkenheim, because if you're in the city for more than 24 hours, the exposure is just too great. It's kind of like being in the radius of nuclear fallout. So every expedition to the city has to be planned carefully, and the characters have to learn new spells, abilities, and find magic items that will protect them against the contamination, because normal spells that would do things like protect you against poison or disease or other magical curses don't work on contamination. They have to learn the new spells that are in the book to defeat these effects.
So based on the fact that you can only be within Drakkenheim for like 24 hours and you can't take a long rest there, it almost makes this, campaign almost feel a little bit like a roguelite, because you have to keep going in and everything keeps changing based on the consequences of your actions and things like that.
Monty and I were big fans of Metroidvania style games.
Yeah.
So one of the ways that we actually structure this campaign, which may not be obvious at the outset, if a player's like, I want to just go to the castle, that's going to be extremely difficult. You can see the castle in the background. It's there in the city, but the deeper you go into the city, the more contaminated it gets. And there's literally a wall around the city that encapsulates the inner city from the outer city. So when characters start, they're exploring the outer city, and in the outer city, they'll get the tools and resources they need to actually handle some initial interactions with the haze and the contaminations, which will then allow them to, their first foray past the walls is going to be a pretty dangerous time. Once they get past the walls and venture further in, they're slowly picking up rumors and clues to different sites that will give them the spells and the magic items and the knowledge on how they can venture into more contaminated areas in the city. And because they can't take a long rest, every expedition, they have to go to one of these sites, find the items and magic that they need, and then get out and then plan their next expedition. So slowly it's like that roguelite versus, combined with Metroidvania, where you're collecting these tools to unlock the doors to go further into the city to your eventual goals, which usually lie somewhere in the heart. We have places like the Academy Tower, Queen's Park Garden, the castle itself, and the crater site are some of the most dangerous places that you'll have to get to towards the end of the campaign.
And that's where even games like the artwork that's up behind us, which is this panorama view that's on the DM screen, and it's also in the book. This was meant to evoke that feeling that you got when you played games like Breath of the Wild and you stepped out on the hill and you saw there's Hyrule Castle in the distance, and it's that looming threat that looms over everything. And so even in the art design for the city, we wanted the look of it to be like, look at all these amazing places that are tantalizing, but look at what you have to do to get there. So players have to come into Drakkenheim with a goal. They have to have something that they want, because this is a dangerous city, and people who aren't willing to risk their lives for something, they don't come to Drakkenheim. This is not an adventure for the timid characters. This is an adventure for people who want to get something.
So I mean, one, like, I can't wait to get my hands on this. Like, this is, you're literally just checking off the boxes for me. It's just like, like, please, like, oh my God. But I want to wrap things up. But before I do, any tips for DMs who are going to be running this campaign for the first time?
Monty, go ahead.
I think my biggest tip is my DMing philosophy is that I prepare to improvise. And when Kelly and I wrote the book, there's an order of magnitude more information in the book than we had when we played the original campaign. And so I find that the real key is that the book is there to be a toolbox for you to use to respond to the players and to let them drive the action. I've heard from so many DMs that are like, the campaign's this kind of magical thing that once it gets started, you can you just know how to respond, and so use it as a tool. Don't be afraid to use your discretion and make it yours in the process.
My tip for running a Drakkenheim campaign, if there's one chapter that you should try your best to get a firm grasp on, it is the factions. And knowing what a lot of people will pick their favorite faction. Even I have my favorite factions, but if I'm running the game, I want to throw my idea of what my favorite faction is out the window. I want to make sure as a DM that I know what makes each faction a good faction to back, or a bad faction that you want to have as an enemy. And if I have both of those, if I know both of those and I can respond to both of those, whenever your player characters are getting close to a faction, remind them why this faction is a little bit evil. And whenever they are making an enemy of one of the factions, make that faction remind them why they might be right. And then that's going to make it endlessly complicated for the players. But in there lies the complications of choice, and those choices that drive the campaign forward. And in the end, they're going to have to choose. And that's the beauty of a Drakkenheim campaign. So the best thing you can do as a DM, not pick sides, and just try to present every faction as both good and evil in equal measure, and let the players dictate how that's going to go.
Well, so thank you once again, so much for coming. Be sure to check out Dungeons at Drakkenheim, which is available for pre-order on D&D Beyond. It will be coming out on that platform in the very near future. And also be sure to check out the Dungeon Dudes if you haven't already. I mean, if you're watching this channel, chances are you've checked them out. But in the off chance that you haven't, please go and check them out because they're fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you
so
very much. Thank you, Monty. Thank you, Kelly. And be sure, of course, as always, to like and subscribe the Character Sheet.